So, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you had a nice cup of tea, coffee, or a drink, or a bite to eat. I know it's not 15 minutes. You won't be able to have a 3-course meal, but nonetheless, hopefully you've had some sustenance to get us going for the next session. There was just one point I wanted to add in terms of my summary earlier on, and that is some of the points made in the chat since we closed from Katri and Marshall, definitely valid points, and drawing out and emphasizing the discussion we had on balancing of the terms, the use of the terms, the delineation, and making sure they are understood as opposed to create more confusion. There will be a testing phase linked to the guidance notes and separate from the guidance notes of testing the proposals, potentially with users as well. So we won't be going into this with a blind set of scenarios. We will be testing them. So I'm now going to move on to this next session where we have 3 speakers, and similar to the previous session, we will do the 3 set presentations back to back, and then we'll open up for discussion. Again, the presenters, please keep to the time available. Don't speak too quickly to help our interpreters. And then for the participants, please utilize the chat for your comments and questions appropriate, and we'll come back to that later. So the first one will be Charles Cersedy, who's a senior statistician at the African Development Bank. I'm now going to hand over to you, Charles. Hopefully you can now share your presentation and you can unmute yourself as well. So camera on. Now, I know we had some tricky issues before, so I'm hoping you can do this now, Charles. There's no technical issues. That's looking good. You can see the presentation. Can't hear you, Charles.
Okay, can you hear me now?
That's excellent. Okay, off you go.
Fine. Okay. Thank you. Okay, after the presentation on taxonomy and terminology, let us listen to another important issue related to the updating of the DSNA. This is the alignment to statistical standards. Our presentation will be done in 4 points. First, we'll talk about what we mean by compliance, what the word compliance means, what we can understand by this word. And the second, the overview of alignment framework. And in third, we'll talk about the communication of assessment to users, and finished with the 4th point, that is the alignment framework. First, what does the word complying mean in statistics? When we take a view on this 2008 SNA, we can see that 62% of economies throughout the world already said that they compile using 2008 SNA. But what does this mean? This statistic does not tell us the degree to which the key concepts, method of the 2008 SNA are implemented across these countries. You can see that through the figure that those who are in blue are compile national account using the 2008 SNA. Have a green card are those countries who continue to use 1993 SNA, and we who used 1968 SNA, and a few countries, a few economies did not use any kind of SNA. Okay, our big question is that what does it mean when we compliance? Our work is to develop first reflection on the work compliance is to develop a framework to measure alignment to the statistical framework. This framework point is to propose a framework that countries can use to gauge the alignment to international standards. And on communication issue, we propose guidance on how this information can be communicated to users and stakeholders. And the use of this tool set up by the national statistic offices. Main uses include how to improve country, help to prioritize resources, planning and development, and signal to users, and so on. What we mean now by the word alignment is what exactly is a statistical standard. Given that a statistical standard contains many concepts, methods, accounting rules, classification, and account tables, we need to prioritize this list. Now, the communication task team proposed that the alignment framework be developed around the following components of the international statistical standards. We have first the concepts. We think about how can we set up a tool that can help us to have alignment to production, income, assets, methods we use when we talk about chain linking, double deflation, and seasonal adjustment. Accounting rules, for example, equal are these aggregates are compiled on equal basis, how kind of consolidation are made, the netting, and the kind of classification used by countries, are they important to talk about alignment, or also the accounts that are compiled by countries, like a country that compile production account, that generation of income account, financial account, are they important to say that this country is really compiling national account using the 2000 SNA, for example. After analyzing, or given that macroeconomic statistics are mainly used to analyze the structure, we propose that we can focus on the features of the statistical standard that impacts the level of economic activity and growth rates. And that are concepts like production, for example. How can we have the same, how can we measure the alignment to the production through all countries, economies, and methods? How are using deflation measures? Did they use the appropriate price indices when we talk about deflation? And also, the third one is the accounting rules. That's very important. It is all the aggregates calculated by these countries, how they evaluate this aggregate. For example, when we talk about capital fixed consumption, we see that there are a lot of methods through countries to evaluate this kind of aggregate, for example. Okay, now when we talk clearly about concepts, when we take the first one, that is the concepts. The concepts are the foundation of a statistical standard. They reflect the articulation of a macroeconomic idea, activity, interaction, states, notion, and concept. What is measured is what the concept is, the way the concept is defined. When we consider the concept of production, the 2000 SNA, production, the SNA ultimately determines the size of a given economy. In a production, an economy can cover, for example, observed market output, but can face some challenge to cover non-observed market output. How can we merge this kind of target together? Non-market output, for example, how countries are doing well to measure this kind of production. Output for own final use, and more important, illegal output. For example, we have in some countries illegal production that can be very important, and the essence is how can we compare by using a kind of framework that can help us to say the same thing. Other key concepts include income, assets, capital formation, expenditure, consumption, etc. Now, concerning accounting rules reflect the guidelines that compilers should follow when recording transaction and other economic flows. Okay. Accounting rules determine how activity get recorded. For example, a key accounting rule in the SNA is the transaction that are recorded on an accrual basis. How this is really done by countries. This is very important issue that we raise, and to know how to measure alignment to this kind of rules. And the issue of valuation is so important, because when we take the market output, how is it valued at basic price? Is it really valued by using the same rule for every country? Output for own use is valued at equivalent market prices. But how countries are using this kind of rules? These are very important when we talk, and other thing also. The methods used are closely associated with accounting rules and concepts. They can be interpreted as the way in which an accounting rule is implemented or how a concept is measured. As you may know, the statistical standards list several recommended methods related to valuation, calculation of volumes, etc., that should be included in this framework to help everyone to use appropriate methods and facilitate the comparison through economies. Now, concerning action, it determines the level of detail that is presented to users and which kinds. For example, when you take the classification of sectors, you have household, non-profit, the 5 important sectors you have when you are compiling national accounts. How should we compile national account using this kind of classification? How? Or when we take, for example, the production approach, determine GDP, what gets measured at the limit, this could result in publication of a single number. You see, you can say, well, you have only the production for each country, but you need a classification that can detail. And which kind of classification can we use when we talk about we talk about alignment? For example, when we take a single estimate of production, would not be very useful and lead to questions what mean, and we know each of be interested to know the detail of this production. And classification also, we need to understand a consistent presentation of details or granular information to users and a standard approach to aggregating the information. The fifth point is the accounts. The account outline how information is presented to users. As I used to say, the most statistical standards have identified a set of accounts, tables that are considered minimum requirement. And our goal here is to present the same information to help users not to to be to know clearly what to see clearly what they are using when they take the national account produced by a country. The communication, yes, the communication assess, yes,
Two-ish minutes left. Thanks.
okay. Communication assessment result is it is 3 minutes. Okay. Alignment framework communicating the information. While some consideration was given to the development of a scoring system or a methodology to communicate country assessment to users, a dashboard approach is preferred. We prefer a dashboard because when you take only a score, a country's alignment to a statistical of may create a disincentive to use the framework and misuse the results. Any aggregate score would require some form of weighting mechanism. Okay. Now, the starting point of the dashboard is the alignment framework. Most of the items in the framework can be structured to solicit a yes or no response. However, this does not provide the granularity needed to properly interpret the results. For each item in framework, the compiling organization would indicate if they are fully alignment between 75 to 100%, partially alignment, do not alignment, or not applicable. And the communication information important that we want to say it is to present by each kind of production, for example, boundaries, what kind of, is it fully aligned to, or is it partially alignment? The country will present this kind of for alignment. Okay. Possible uses of the alignment tool will be cross-country comparison. Market output, for example, can be compiled by a defined country A and the same in country B. Non-market outputs, but inputted services, for example, is not compiled by the country B. These kinds of comparison help to know which country really align to the user, the rules that will be defined. And these are important questions that that will be very important for us to define the alignment degree of a given country. Okay. Thank you very much, Sanjeev. I think it is over. Thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you, Charles. Don't sound so bad. It's done well. It's not over. Sounds painful.
No,
It
it is
sounds
the
painful.
beginning.
No, it's good. Well done.
Thank
So
you.
I will now swiftly move on to James to break from the IMF to talk about the Statistics Compiler Hub, which is a slightly different strand, but another strand to what we're doing under communication. Over to you, James. And can you share? Yeah, that's it.
It's good. Yeah.
It was just making sure the slides were in presentation mode. That's great. I can hear you as well. Off you go. Thanks.
Perfect. Good. Yeah. So I'll be quick about this. So thanks for the opportunity to present. As Sanjeev mentioned, this is under the work of the communications task team, but it's not really so much about the update of the SNA. Most of the work that's been done by the communications task team is about communicating with our users, which is extremely important, as we've just heard. This work is really about allowing us as a community, if you would, a community of practice, communicate better together. So this is really not on the critical path, if you would, of the SNA update. It's a tool that we're hoping to stand up over the next while that will facilitate the work of not only the community of national accountants, but of balance payments compilers, GFS compilers. So as the other presentations, just give you a few thoughts around the objective of what we're calling a compiler's hub. So it's a digital platform for us to meet where we are in terms of the project and what the early structure of the hub looks like and what are some of the next steps. And I was asked by the IT and the Creative Labs group at the IMF who were helping us put together to note that this is blue sky thinking. So not all of the features that I'm going to talk about would be implemented in the first go around. There are maybe a few clouds on the horizon, if you would, to tamper that blue sky. So what's really the purpose, or what are we trying to do here? As I mentioned, it's really meant about bringing us together as a community. It's an opportunity for us to centralize and share knowledge, engage in discussions, convene on topical conversations, and even potentially collaborate together on projects. So we're really trying to move into the digital world, maybe that we've seen a lot of other communities move into, such as IT professionals who are very much using digital technologies to collaborate and share knowledge. So we're seeing if can we push the boundaries as a community there. So what are the project stages? What have we done so far? Well, there's been a lot of work on design. So what is this going to look like? What do we as a community essentially need? What are some of the problems that we're trying to solve? So there was a number of internal and external discussions held early on just to get a very high level set of requirements. What are some things that we find challenging? What do we need to accomplish? The second set then focused on, well, if these are the challenges we have, so sharing resources, what's the information architecture? What's the design, if you would, of the platform that would allow us to be able to do that? We set up a number of models, if you would, or tests or surveys where we engaged around 500 participants asking for feedback. And this is feedback on things like, what are the type of terms that you would expect to, if you would go to a site, expect to use? How would you expect information to be grouped together so that it could be easily discovered by you as an individual? So we received just an incredible amount of feedback, and thank you for everybody who participated in that. From that, we developed what are called personas. These are different users that might come to this platform, and they may take different paths through the platform. So we developed these personas. Then we had interviews with a number of different individuals to get their feedback on that initial information architecture. From there, what we've developed are what are called wireframes, and these are really the aspirations, what we expect the site to look at, and how we expect users to engage with it, and some of the functionality. And this is where that blue sky thinking comes in. So these wireframes, which I'll share with you in a moment, are really what we kind of collectively as a community have identified as being very helpful for us in the course of our work. Now that goes over to the IT professionals, who will then look at that and try and determine what is actually feasible, and at least in the short term versus the longer term. And once we have that feedback, we can start the implementation. And of course, that implementation will be very much an agile implementation, where we will be trying to stand things up very quickly and get feedback. So the rest of the presentation is really going to focus on these wireframes that we've stood up and to walk you through it. So before I do that, I'm going to just, Yeah, so before I take you through those wireframes, just to give you a little bit about the structure of the site. So what are those three things that in those consultations that came out as being potentially very useful? Individuals indicated a centralization of resources would be very useful. There's a lot of information about guides, manuals, working papers, groups, but you have to go to 6 or 7 different international organization websites or national websites to get that information. It takes you a long time to discover it. Sometimes you don't discover it at all, so you might do your work and you might be missing, an important thing that would allow you, an important resource that would allow you to undertake that work. So that's one of the things that we're trying to tackle with this hub is a centralization, if you would, of the resources, and I'll talk about how that'll work in a bit. Then there's this idea of having community discussions, a good way for communities to know the rest of the community, who are all of the players and actors. So we have a list of 400 participants on this set of meetings. So that's part of the community. How can we allow you to connect to people not just once a year during the UNECE meeting, but throughout the year in different form and different means? And then how could we potentially even collaborate on projects together in a digital way? So that's really what the information architecture has been built around. It's been built around these 3 different pillars, if you would: resources, community, and collaboration. This is just an overview of the site structure. So the site structure will have a home page, then I'll have essentially an area for resources, an area for community discussions, forums. I'll get into that a little bit more, and then a collaboration area, an area where we can actually collaborate together on projects. And it's also got this idea of being absolutely open so that anybody can come to the platform and discover, if you would, all of the different information that's on there. But there is also a user feature, and we are hoping that you as a community would become a user and register yourself as a user on the platform, because what that allows you to do first is it allows you to engage in those discussions rather than maybe just view those discussions. It also would allow you to engage in the projects maybe rather than just view the projects. Everybody will be able to access the information that's on the platform. But if you're a user and you come in as a user, you in a way get these added benefits that allow you to in a way contribute to the community and more actively, I guess, receive information from the rest of the community. Last thing I'll say about the user account, and I'll go to the next screen, which talks about a little bit more. Oops, sorry about that. When you set up your user profile, if you would, you'll kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you work, and what are maybe your current areas of expertise. You would be able to tell us if you're maybe a quarterly national accounts expert or an annual national accounts expert, or maybe a balance payments expert, GFS, or whether you're more on the income side or on the expenditure side. Whatever that might be, we've set up a taxonomy that will allow you to very quickly identify those areas of expertise and those maybe areas of current research. That sets up a profile, and what that allows us to do then when you're a user is it allows us to feed you information that's already on the platform that would be useful in the context of your work. So we might be able to then say, hey, you're working on the digital economy. Well, did you know that there's this information that's just been released or just been updated? So in a way, the idea is that if you're a user on the platform, we'll be able to push information to you that we're hopeful will facilitate you and your work. It would also kind of keep track of your activity on the platform. So whether you've made some posts, whether you're part of any working groups, or whether maybe somebody has kind of cited something that you have done or you've said. So we're hoping that this creates a really nice profile for you on the platform, and we're going to encourage your continued engagement on it. I'll just talk a little bit about the resources section of the hub. So this needs a little bit of explaining. Now, the idea is as I mentioned, is that we, in a way, centralize and bring some consistency to the way the different assets across the statistical domains are referenced, are categorized, cataloged onto the system, so that really you have one place where you would come and you would say, okay, I'm doing some work on some sustainable finance, and you could maybe come to this area and you could do a quick search on that, and you'd be fairly confident that all of the information in the statistical community being done on statistical finance is being accessed here. Now, the site would not actually sort of ingest all of those different documents into the site. Instead, what it's doing is going to be providing a link. Now, how is that different from a Google search? Well, we think that this is going to be a little bit better, more efficient in terms of getting you the information that you need a little bit more quickly and making sure that you're getting all of that information. Still a little bit of work here that needs to be done, but one of the things that we're hoping is that organizations, national organizations, international organizations, when you've completed some work on a specific topic, you come to the site and you post a link to that short abstract so that, again, it's discoverable and searchable on the platform. We're not asking you to load the paper or load any of the information on the site, but just make the rest of the community aware that this work has gone on. So that's really the thrust behind the resources. And of course, we've tried to come up with a way of structuring this information for your easy reference and use. The second feature of the platform is really about connecting you with everyone else. And this is the idea that you may want to engage, we may want to engage as an SNA in kind of an open discussion. And you could see if this was up and running, we might even want to run a lot of the consultation process of the SNA update through the platform. It's not there yet, so we're not able to do that, but maybe once it's up, we might want to be able to do it. But regardless, pretend there's no SNA update going on, and you as an individual may have a question on a certain topic. You can come to the forum and you can, one, see if that topic was ever discussed before and read the threads of previous discussions, or you may want to post a question and see if experts from around the world might be able to share some information that they've have on that specific topic. The idea is that these conversations can be either public or they could be private. So sometimes we have a question and we're not too sure about, we want the whole world to see the question. So we might want to just reach out to a few people and have a private conversation. That's perfectly fine. And we want to make avenue for that on the platform, but we also want to have avenues for a much broader type of discussion. Of course, the hope is that these discussions are saved and those discussions themselves become assets for the community so that they can come back and reference those at any point down the line. And the last one, again, is this idea of, could we even take that one step further and allow and have a platform where we might actually have co-development and collaboration occurring together. So we might have a project where maybe we want to stand up a tool that would allow us to maybe calculate a consumer price index, so a spreadsheet type tool that would allow us, when the number of prices being collected are not that great, to somehow stand up a tool to do that. Could we get together on the community and say, hey, I have an idea, I have a need. Does anybody have a similar tool? Can you load it up? Can we work on it together and in a way collaborate and co-develop a solution? Now, it could be some sort of tool coding. It could also maybe even be a project, a research project, where maybe we're looking to stand up a set of data, experimental data, that we would want to collaborate together. But the idea is that, can we widen your current set of collaborators into a much more global set of collaborators. So yeah, I just had some questions at the end, but I'm just very curious if, this type of platform, if you think that this would assist you in your work, what would be the most important features? What would be something that you'd say, you know what, if that's there, I don't want any part of it. And then if you could even think of any resources that your organization might have that can contribute to the platform. So that's where we're at. That's the design as of today. It is quite blue sky. We will, of course, come back to you with what we're actually able to implement in the time frame that we're able to implement it in, and of course, continue to seek your input into this project. Thank you. I'll stop sharing and turn it back over to you, Sanjeev.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Jim. I'll come back to the presentations once we've got the third one out done. Francisco, who's from Inigi in Mexico. Good to see you as always. Over to you straight away. 15 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you, Sanjeev. Let me show now?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, let me try again. No, not yet.
Not yet. Have you put it into screen mode and then share screen?
Okay.
So is the button on the top left-hand side the fourth one in the sequence?
Yes.
Ah. It was almost there. Marlon, is Francisco still with us? It looks like, is he gone?
I don't think so. Well, I can show the presentation from my screen if it's easier.
He is still with us, but it looks like now he has a problem with audio.
Do you listen me now? Do you listen me?
Francisco, we can hear you. We can see you, but we can't see the presentation.
Okay. Now is the presentation there?
Not yet.
Cisco, let me run presentation for you. You will need just to tell just next slide and that's all, okay?
Okay.
So we're on the front introductory title slide, Francisco.
Yes, let me introduce.
Just one request when you ask
Okay,
go to the next slide, please don't forget that because I may just
thank you very much. Yes,
stuck on the same page.
Yes, thank you. Well, my name is Francisco Guillen, and I work as Sanjeev said, I work for the National Institute of Statistics, Geography, and Geography. And of course, when I was thinking about this presentation, I was thinking to motivate in relation with these issues around, and I believe around the world, because everybody or many countries has to treat with some experts in our countries, with some politicians, with some private sectors, researchers, or the academic. So in this case, I am trying to motivate around these efforts in relation with these main points with the terminology, for instance, with the views of preliminary and revised data, and of course with the explanation what we have to do in relation with our users. In this case, in the case of Mexico, we are we use the generic statistical business process model that give us an idea about what happened the users, and we have some steps, especially in relation with the users. And of course, in the case of Mexico, we are trying to make every time a consultation with the users. And when we change the base year of the national accounts, and to keep the relevance of our national accounts, our experience give us an idea to make the first consultation to engage, to link the needs from the users with this specific product that we call the Mexican national accounts. Next, please. And of course, we have four pillars, and but with these pillars, we try to communicate and to disseminate in the way to understanding and the use of economic statistics. Of course, we have to look and to create value for the different user profiles, and is essential for our work to connect with them and to show what happened in relation with the understanding. And this becomes part of this good effort to try to have uh, another view of the communication, to have some specific guidelines to look what happened with our users, to know to don't disturb the conceptual framework in relation with the concepts, terminology, and so on. In these aspects, for us takes special relevance uh, when we have some specific issues or behaviors in our economy. As you know, we have the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was one of the most important things that we treat last year. And of course, next please. And of course, we have to try to obtain to listening the data users. And the four pillars that we have here is to put on the table a constant dialogue with the users, a constant dialogue to obtain value, to create a culture, a statistical culture first, and of course, to go on the national accounts concept with easy words. And that gave us a very big challenge to the understanding of our users. On the other hand, other pillar is the material and exposition that we have to adapt depending on the kind of user that we have. And one thing that probably is very useful for us is the playful dynamics. We have to do some specific dynamics with them to get more understanding in our concepts. And the fourth one is in relation with the presentation of the detail that we have inside of the national accounts, and the detail in relation to or to connect with the projects with the public, private, and academic institutions. And this is another big challenge. So next, please. Uh, for this, we of course has a very constant dialogue with the with data users to three main things: to maintain a permanent contact in different channels, communication channels, to consider the essential and to create that value that we want to get, and to correct the interpretation of our users. The other is in relation, and during the dialogues, we have to include some examples to reflect the border of the concept, the terminology, to put inside of of our main purpose, our users under, with understand all our main indicators that we publish almost every day, and we serve to the data users. We always offer to have a personalized and regular way when someone wants to look with more detailed information. Next, please. On the other hand, the material is important and the exposition are adapted depending on the use profile. In this way, uh, to communicate the topics and to have a very good result with the user depends on the type and level of the questions and the level of or the profile of our users. And for the user with a decision making profile, uh, uh, even with them, we have to use a simple language and we have to emphasize on the main results of our products. And it's possible to push them to and to look how they apply, and this becomes part of the connection with those that are using the national accounts. On the other hand, we have to look uh, 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 the different levels of the technicians that we are uh, talking with them, and how to improve the language to put the methodology in the right way without the boundaries of our terminology. And for the general users, we have to use another kind of language. We have to be very simple and we have to look other things in relation, next please, in relation not only with the techniques, with the playful dynamics. And the playful is a technique, and this gives us another steps to really integrate the users in order to generate first an atmosphere of trust, second to encourage a more fluid dialogue with them, and of course we have to listen in the different proposals of coming users for the needs, and of course to look the content that we are presented. And one of these tools could be Kahoot, Mentimeter, or Send Steps, for example. And the next, please. And that give us good results. And of course, we have for some other users a presentation with a very detailed data in and specifically with the public, private, and academic institutions. And we did workshops and seminars, and in this moment, we know probably the difference between the views that they have and the use and the needs of our users. And of course, we have to transmit the knowledge and the terminology, methodology from our products of national accounts to uh, give or to maintain the idea about what we are looking inside of the national accounts. And of course, the user or the depth of knowledge that has the users means probably in some cases, if we are speaking with experts, we have a good feedback to go beyond the products that we are looking for, and we are trying to help them to use and to cross the different products in relation to create a new value for the users. And of course, we try to apply a questionnaire to assess our work in many of our seminars, workshops, or meetings. Next, please. And of course, in our conclusions, we believe that it's very important to adapt the material, the publications, but in the framework of the terminology, in the framework of the data, when we are trying to say if the data is preliminary, revised, and of course we have to explain in easy way the information. And we understand that the essence of INEGI is to produce information that is used properly. And of course, we are trying to produce information for the users, not for the understanding for only one people or only one specialist or expert. Then with this, we could keep our statistics in a relevant way and the use of the publications. We know that we have to do more effort. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Francisco. Excellent. So in this second part of this session, we've gone through 3 further presentations, summarizing in terms of the presentation from Charles, which can be quite sensitive because we're talking about the alignment to the international standards, the compliance. We do not want to produce, and this is again a balanced theme throughout today, we do not want to produce an assessment and a score that says you're okay and not okay. What we're saying is we want to ensure users are fully aware or are much better aware of the basis of the accounts, the statistics that each country has when they do the analysis. So, for example, do they handle some of the concepts in the way the international guidelines suggest? Are they on a particular classification? Are they on SNA 2008, BPM 6 or BPM 5, or etc.? So this metadata and this alignment of process will be another example of challenging us, but again with the thrust to better inform our users. And it's very important that there's a balance to be struck in how we use this tool. This type of tool is obviously used in the EU a lot more in a more stringent, rigorous way, but we're not proposing that type of approach. Okay, there's lots of administrative reasons to use what's been in place in the EU, but not here. Secondly, Jim covered in terms of tools. Again, we're now bridging the gap between the production community and our user community. And some of those examples that Jim produced in his presentation are really exciting. It means that we are more outwardly looking. There's a big world out there that probably doesn't get enough of economic statistics, doesn't necessarily have easy access, doesn't necessarily have the comparability. This will provide a whole string of benefits in terms of bringing a community together, especially many people who are not aware. In terms of information sharing, questions, the Compilers Hub is a really key direction of travel. And then finally, the 4 presentations you had earlier are obviously covered in the communication work stream, and Francisco has then brought together what INEGI are doing. And it just shows that the link that they have with their user base, the need to speak in a simpler language that the user understands, goes a long way to have better engagement. So I'm going to encourage people again, any comments in the chat, any questions, if you want to put your green hand up, by all means. I'm going to pause for a moment because I haven't seen anything. So I'm going to be a bit more provocative to see how far people go. So when you looked at Charles' presentation and the strands of alignment, compliance is a harsher word, but alignment is a softer word. Do people feel they'd be comfortable in answering those questions? In terms of Jim's presentation, what do people think? Is this something that they would engage with? They would like to be able to put more links of their country information there? Would they include, say, the academic field, students? There are many users out there that we would like them to be able to access national data and international data on a comparable scenario. Okay, so would people like a scoring system? I'm not getting much joy on the floor at the moment. It sounds like you're all comfortable with the direction of travel of what's being proposed, because please note, in Charles' presentation, there's a lot of information there that will need to be compiled, obviously on a voluntary basis, but it will mean even us producers compare against ourselves. How comparable are we? How close are we to the standards that have been set? Are we really and truly on 2008 SNA? Do we fully comply with BPM 6? Does it mean we haven't done so and it helps to prioritize our resources and plans to do so? Is it that important in the economy? Right. Eventually, I knew I was going to get someone to come along. But Peter, it's surprising you don't want to take the floor. So Peter's talking about the hub, the compiler's hub, reference to confidential data and information. How will this hub, in terms of its strictures, systems, the coding, the firewalls, in a sense, I suppose, retain confidentiality? So in the meantime, I will hand that over to Jim, and I encourage other people to think about any thoughts, comments on the other two presentations, or Jim's as well. Over to you, Jim.
Yeah, thanks for the excellent question, Peter. Yeah, our thinking behind the hub is it's not really a data exchange type platform. It's not a platform where people would go and get data. It is really more for discussion on conceptual methodological issues and pointing people to documentation around that. The collaborative space where maybe you can see in order to work together to stand up a new statistical product. Of course, you may need some data as you're working on that. We need to do some thinking around that. I would say that's an area where I think when we go in to develop it, it's going to have to. Those types of questions are going to have to be in the back of our mind. But really, it is meant more for these conceptual methodological discussions. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. We have a question from Hidi Ishibashi from Japan, who also doesn't want to take the floor, but I think it's an excellent question. The way I would turn it around is we've had a lot of discussion about the alignment and compliance approach, whether we'd have a clear-cut, quantified sort of scoring system, but we've deliberately, for many reasons, moved away to a softer approach. So whether you're fully aligned, partially aligned, not aligned, etc., and give some sort of range, because this sort of assessment and self-assessment will be subjective, but will be very useful to users. So we wouldn't want to discourage countries to do so. So again, I use the key word of balance, striking that balance between information that would be useful for the users, but at the same time, we don't want to say, oh, here's the naughty boys club. The naughty boys who are not fully compliant with BPM 6, we will now list them. That is not the objective. So obviously, to avoid that repercussion, we've gone with a softer approach. I'm going to come back to Charles if you want to add anything to that, please. Charles?
Thank you, Sanjeev. I think it is a very important issue, but when we talk about alignment, when we take, for example, to quote what is the degree of the country, the problem is what are the challenges the country face, and what is important here is to help a country to follow really the let's say the concepts and notes that is in the SNA without so go through, because when we talk about fully alignment, we think that when we take that the degree between 75 and 100%, it is more important to this country have done a good job or not. But the important thing is to help countries doing it without being constrained, because they will do it with their fully they will accept to do it, and will help to have data that are very, let's say, comparable through the world. That is the important thing when we talk about alignment. But it will be important also to know what is the degree of each country. That's very important also. And to know how, if you want to use that kind of data, which kind of appropriate correction is necessary, and so on and so forth. It's very. I'm happy to have this kind of question. We will work on it truly and have, let's say, any kind of comment will be very important for us to improve what the country will say for the next SNA.
Okay. Thank you very much, Charles. I think I would expand on that a little bit also to say that if, say, you're partly aligned and it's a significant activity in the country, it's the sort of information and the evidence base that allows you and your seniors to help prioritize where you want to put your resources, where you want to put your investment, is it worthwhile, etc. So there are not just benefits for the users, there are also a range of benefits for us as producers. I'm just going to take a little nice opportunity to put my friend Francisco on the spot. And I apologize in advance, Francisco. But when you hear the idea of putting together a type of an assessment, whether you're partly aligned, fully aligned with the concepts, as a statistical head in your department, how do you feel about that?
Well, let me be honest. In some cases, it's very difficult to feel good with the results when we have a very close contact with them. Why? Because in some cases, even when we are trying our best work to communicate concepts, terminology, classifications, in some cases they want to look another way. And let me give you one example. When we are talking about the restaurants, in some cases they want to look that the tourists inside of the restaurants, and they believe that almost all the restaurants could be a tourist for a tourist purpose, and that is not true. Depends on the zone, depends on the geographical information, and depends on the diverse of the indicators. And of course, when we are trying to communicate in different ways for the users in relation with their own geographical points, they transform the idea of the concept of restaurant and becomes part of the tourism inside of the restaurant. And this is only one example. It's very difficult. So we cannot feel so much good. We have to make so many efforts every time with them. So, and on the other hand, we are looking for different techniques, as I said before, to give the best understanding in our work. That's just an experience. But on the other hand, we have the positive side because when we feel that the users has a comprehensive view, they use the data in a very well way for research or for taking decisions in the private sector or on the public sector. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you, Francisco. I wasn't trying to scare you, but the interesting assessment I would make from putting Francisco on the spot as a key producer of official statistics in Mexico is that he wasn't scared. And I think it's a very important point, because what we are not trying to do when we finish and complete for the guidance note and global consultation, the list of questions, whether it's a quantitative yes, no type clear answer or a subjective answer, is not to scare the producers. We will actually compromise, we will actually complete that bridge and that journey. It's to, again, help the users. I'm going to come to the final point I've got in the list, Richard Hayes. It was interesting in this second part of the session, not many people or anyone's been keen to take the floor. It's almost like, but nonetheless, Richard's asked a very good question in terms of productivity and the labour metrics. Now, some of that in the accounts, but I think Richard's point is very valid in terms of what will be the scope. It will be BPM, it will be S&A. What's to stop us going anywhere beyond? So it will depend on the type of quality report that we'll finalise. But I think the scope will be there. I think the labour metrics and productivity definitely will be in there. But it's, again, this is voluntary and optional for countries. We're not saying this must be done, but there are many benefits of doing so. Barand, do you want to take the floor? Do you want to be the first person this afternoon? Can you raise your green hand and we'll try to unmute you and you can come on? Okay. Doesn't sound like we're getting much joy there. But in essence, Barand is very supportive of the Compilers Hub, which is good. And in terms of testing, yes, I think it's a general point I would make on all the presentations you've had this afternoon, and in other sessions, testing will be part of the guidance note process. It may be different forms for different areas, but testing is very important. Okay. Barend, you're on.
Yes, Sanjeev, can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Excellent. Now, I just want to commend the work that the IMF is doing. From us in South Africa's case, we've obviously been on a bit of a journey the past 5 years in terms of redesigning our central bank statistical framework, and a lot of that lies anchored in the methodology you apply. And what we've found very helpful over the past 5 years is to use our Irving Fisher Committee on Central Bank Statistics Network, sort of to reach out to the other central banks and to gauge what methodologies they're applying, sometimes to test our methodology and just sort of soundboard it against our different peers. So I think in that regard, we've sort of created an informal approach like that among central bank statisticians. And I think to see that the IMF is in this process is really something I would recommend and support.
Thank you very much for that, Barend. And I'll notice Robert Cornfield from the USA. If you put your green hand, we can then unmute you if you want to come on, please.
I just threw in a small. I like the presentation. I can't say enough positive things about the IMF plan for serving as a platform to share information. I think that's terrific. I'm just wondering how that coordinates with other information sharing platforms like on the OECD website and other websites, and it's all great. I'm just wondering how it gets coordinated.
Okay, thanks for that, Robert. In the spirit of time, I'm going to quickly whiz around Charles, Francisco, and then I'm going to end with Jim so he can pick up this point so we can conclude or head towards a conclusion. So, Charles, have you got anything to add in a minute? And then likewise, Francisco and then Jim. Charles?
No, it's okay with me. If I will have something to add, is that we'll continue to work, take into account all these comments to have a guidance note that reflects the point of view of all ours, and we can contribute to have something finals. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Charles. Anything last moment to add, Francisco?
Yes, John, only one thing. We believe that this effort to look the communication, to look the easy language, to cross between the technical terminology to a very easy language to understand is very important for the users, and of course to exploit the information, especially when we are trying to look the national accounts, the balance of payments, and other manuals in relation with the economic information. That's my conclusion for this. Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you very much, Francisco. And over to you, Jim.
Thanks, first of all, for the positive comments on the work. We're definitely looking forward to moving this forward. I guess the big, maybe two things I want to emphasize. So anything that we're doing, we're going to try and make sure that there's no duplication or duplication of effort. So we want this to complement other things, or we want to collaborate with those other platforms that might be out there and see if we can come to one single one. I think the one, two things I'd want to emphasize is one, yeah, the IMF is maybe leading it, but this is a global platform. This is not an IMF platform. So this is us as a community putting this together. So, there will not be an IMF tag on it. We're just trying to use some resources. We might have the IMF to stand it up. And the other thing is that we're trying to be as inclusive as possible. So this idea of not just a national accounting platform, but a balance of payments, government finance, statistics, prices, and so forth, bringing that in there to bring these communities together and have them have cross statistical domain discussions. So, but thanks very much for the support and continue.
Thank you very much for that. I've got two aspects to pick up. One is linked to the scope of the alignment assessment to include well-being and sustainability indicators, etc. So I think that's something that we haven't branched out enough. We probably will now reflect on that. And there was going to be something from Jens, which he can't connect, but I'm just checking. He hasn't commented in the chat. So I'm going to give him a few seconds. If not, then I will aim to close the session with a conclusion. This is very different from seeing people put up what we call the Toblerone country card, that technically you have to just wait for people to mute, double mute, triple mute, and get back onto unmute. But right, I'm not getting anything from Jens, so I will proceed. So we've had a good session, I think, on communication being a key strand of the research agenda. We've covered the taxonomy through terminology and alignment through the various presentations. I think the type of common themes coming through is the balance to be struck of how far we go from the existing state of play. I think the one question is we must move from our existing state of play in the various domains we've covered. Our users will benefit from that. Our users are telling us they're not getting enough. So for us not to address this, I think will be a massive opportunity missed. So on the taxonomy, the terminology, and the alignment, a lot of these things are there to test the boundaries to see how far we go. And I think we will, and we will take on people's feedback. When the guidance notes come out, there will be opportunities for everyone to comment. And I stress, please make sure you do. We're not there yet. We're taking on feedback. We're doing a lot of work. We're testing it within the groups we're in. So I think it's very important to note that this will not be presented as a fait accompli. Everyone has an opportunity to contribute. So I would like to say thanks to Claire, Albert, Francisco, Charles, and Jim for the presentations. The presentation on the hub is very important because that really is in the user field. And I think that, as you can see, is very similar to various other strands of where we're trying to enhance the user experience. I think Francisco, coming from a statistical producer experience, is very important because he's echoing some of the themes that we're trying to strike, which is excellent. I think we've gone through most of the chat in some way, shape, or form. If you have any further questions or comments that you would like to make, please, by all means, do so in email. It's national.accounts@un.org. Or if it's easier, you can always speak to any of the presenters or myself. We're always willing to receive more emails, so we can spend more afternoons with a glass of wine or two clearing emails, which is really good to have good communication, effective communication. There will be a questionnaire in terms of our session at the end of the meeting on the 26th of May, the last meeting, because the communication is one strand of this year's meeting out of the 6 sessions. Tomorrow there will be a session on digitalization, which will start at the same time, 1300 hours Central European time, and obviously relative to other time zones. The link to the meeting will be open for 1 hour before the meeting, so participants have time to test their connections, and by all means, please do so. Presenters should have already done that. If you haven't, please try again tomorrow, early possible. And I'm just going to check if there's anything that Tiamira or Rami would like to add to what I've concluded. Rami, Tiamira?
Yes, thank you, Sanjeev. Nothing to add from our side, just to thank Gerald and you as chairs today, to Jim as a moderator, and to the presenters for the interesting presentations. See you all tomorrow.